Today we show you the optimal way to tune your skimmer for peak performance, not just collecting the most waste and cleaning the tank, but doing it in a stable manner with as little tweaking as possible, all in 5 minutes or less. Hey, this is Ryan with BRStv's 5-minute guide to skimmers. This Protein Skimmer mini-series is filled with direct answers to the most common questions because information should never be a barrier to getting the most out of your skimmer. This week we show you how to tune a skimmer, actionable information that improves performance, water quality, and ease of system maintenance. The challenge with tuning skimmers is skimmers actually come with very little information on how to use them and what the factors are that affect performance. So how do you use them and how do you know when it's working? I know this can be a challenge because it's something that I struggled with for more than a decade as well. Why do some skimmers just work the moment that you plug them in, but the exact same skimmer doesn't do that for someone else? Why are some constantly overflowing or require frequent tweaking to get right? There are a few things I'm going to say right off the bat. For decades, we've all been told more air is better, and the best way to tune wet versus dry skimming is adjust the water level with a gate valve or riser pipe. I believe those two statements to be just a small part of an overall picture, and most of us have been overlooking some pretty obvious performance or tuning factors. By the end of today's video, I think you're all going to agree. I think at the heart of this, you need to think of a skimmer as a foam engine designed to produce and collect organic-laden foam. Most of you are familiar with a standard combustion engine that mixes air or oxygen and fuel in a controlled reaction chamber to create a desired burst of energy. A skimmer can be thought of in a similar manner. We're mixing air and organic waste or fuel to produce a stable foam head inside a controlled reaction chamber, being the skimmer neck. Whether you're talking about a car engine or a protein skimmer, real tuning is about adjusting that air to fuel ratio to optimal performance. With a combustion engine, if you add too much fuel, it's called running rich, which can dirty the engine, reduce performance, or actually flood the engine and stop working. However, if it's too little fuel, it's called running lean, which can produce inconsistent performance and often stall out. The same thing can happen on a protein skimmer, and we're going to use the exact same terminology when tuning our skimmers: running rich and running lean. Once you know what to look for, the signs of running your protein skimmer organic rich or lean are easy to spot. In the case of a protein skimmer, the fish waste, uneaten food, and organics are the fuel. Running a skimmer rich with too much fuel or waste and not enough air will look like this: dirty brown foam that slowly rises, often has visible chunks in it, and collects a ton of gunk inside the cylinder, but most of the foam fails to rise and very little foam finds its way into the collection cup. The concentration of brown water, floating chunks, and paste add to the challenge and cause the skimmer to run even richer. The engine effectively floods, and most of the organics end up sticking to the cylinder or reaction chamber walls. In this case though, cleaning the paste inside the skimmer's neck can still be an effective way to export organics from the tank, but the foam engine is obviously running less than optimally. If you're running organic rich, there are two solutions. The first is, in some cases, you can use the gate or riser valve to raise the water level inside the skimmer and shrink the foam production chamber. In this case, you may still be running rich and missing some opportunity, but it will help collect more of the foam and a decent option. The other option is add more air and find that optimal mix for the amount of organics inside your tank. When you find that optimal tuning mix, the performance will often look like a steady stream of foam producing a stable, frothy head that consistently flows over into the cup. In this case, because of the optimal engine performance, you won't see as much of the organics collecting inside the neck. The foam will often be whiter, fewer chunks floating around, and a cleaner operating piece of equipment. I'm going to tell you how to adjust the air in just a moment, but what about when a skimmer is running lean, meaning not enough organics for the amount of air in the skimmer, and a sure sign of an oversized skimmer? This is probably the easiest to spot. Milky white, thick bubbles top to bottom of the skimmer, tons of bubbles in the neck, rising super fast, but rather than creating organic-laden foam, it's more like a boiling pot of water where all the bubbles burst immediately at the top. In this case, in running lean, what's happening is there isn't enough organics in the tank to support that amount of air. The net result is a deficient amount of organics for the foam engine causes a fragile bubble. The high velocity of air leaving the skimmer neck causes all the bubbles to pop before they can create that stable foam head, hence why it looks like a boiling pot of water rather than a foam engine. If you're running organic or fuel lean, there are two ways to address this as well. First, you can use that gate or riser valve to increase the water level inside the skimmer in hopes of catching some of the bubbles before they pop. However, in this case, you're probably going to find very erratic results where the skimmer randomly overflows a lot, likely hours after feeding when there's an increased amount of organics or fuel for the engine. Alternatively, the second option is you can just reduce the amount of air feeding the skimmers and match it to your feeding habits, fish load, and overall organic input. I believe this is going to produce the best results. Now that we know how the skimmer's foam engine works, what are the best ways to tune that fuel to air ratio and achieve optimal performance? Luckily, I call most of this pretty straightforward. First, start by making sure you install the skimmer at the recommended water height. This matters because water height changes head pressure and pump performance. In our experiments, we found water height to have a dramatic impact on the smaller skimmers and lower wattage pumps in particular. Water height matters. If you toss the instructions, most of them can be found on our site, or the manufacturer websites often have the instructions that you can download as well. From that point, use the gate or riser tube to collect the foam to the best it can. Over the next couple weeks, make adjustments as necessary. At that point, you'll likely see the signs of either optimal performance or signs of running organic lean or rich. If you're seeing signs of running organic rich, there are a few options to add more air to the skimmer. The first is simply raise the water level in your sump an inch at a time, which effectively reduces head pressure on the pump, increases the amount of air it injects, and again, this is particularly effective on smaller skimmers and lower wattage pumps. Related to that, make sure to keep the pump clean so the pump runs optimally, as well as clean the venturi port because it's common for them to get partially clogged. Outside that, if you happen to have an adjustable DC skimmer pump, there's an opportunity to increase the amount of air with a simple click of a button. Increasing the pump speed increases the air, and by far the easiest way to do this. Outside of those adjustments, if you're still seeing signs of running organic rich, you may simply have a skimmer undersized for your organic input. As long as it's performing to your desires and nitrate and phosphate levels are not continually rising or out of control, I probably wouldn't replace it. But you now know what to look for when you upgrade your system, and more air, and preferably an option that allows you to adjust the air. Running lean, meaning not enough organics or too much air for your organic load, is something entirely different. This is much easier to adjust and likely a much more common tuning challenge with today's high-powered performance skimmers. Again, the signs of running lean is a ton of bubbles rapidly rising, but they all burst at the top. More like a boiling pot of water than foam production and collection. In this case, we want to tune down the amount of air injected and leaving the skimmer through the neck. One of the primary benefits here is reducing the air injection, and the bubbles, they'll rise slower, few of them will pop prematurely, and you'll start to produce a foam head matched to the amount of organics in the tank. Tuning the air down can be done by decreasing the sump water level, which increases head pressure on the skimmer pump. You can also just put a valve on the air line. A common way to do that is a 3/8" Murlock valve with the stem to barb adapters. Note, when you turn down the air, you will also increase the water flow feeding the skimmer, so this only works to a point and maybe half the air reduction. After that, you might see micro bubbles leaving the skimmer and other difficulties tuning. There are actually skimmers out there that have air tuning built into the skimmer itself, like the Skims, which actually have the valve built into the silencer for easy tuning. If you have a DC skimmer, however, you can use the control pad to decrease the speed of the pump, which will slow down the water flow and air draw at the same time. So tuning the air means start at the top speed, then tune the water height to the best of your ability with a gate or standpipe. Leave it alone for a few hours or even a day, and then slow the pump down one step with the control pad and monitor the results, repeating until the skimmer is optimized to your system and organic level input. In any case, once the air to organic ratio is achieved and matched the right size of reaction chamber, creating that desired type of foam, a nice stable foam head that maintains shape and rises. Then just use the gate or riser tube to adjust how that foam is collected. The factor that we didn't talk about yet is proper sizing of the skimmer and matching it to your tank. I think you'll be surprised how many factors go into getting that right, and that's going to be our next topic. You can find the entire skimmer mini-series right here because information should never be a barrier to getting the most out of your skimmer.